This is House Planning Help episode 109. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you want to transition to an ultra low energy home, whether new build or retrofit. I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century. My personal goal is to create an energy efficient home before I turn 40 in August 2016. Coming up in this session, my guest is Cesar Abeid from the Project Management for the Masses podcast. We're going to be exploring project management, what it all means, and whether becoming a project manager of your house build is actually a good idea. You're probably thinking of cost cutting and how wonderful it's going to be. We'll discuss that after we've gone through some project management basics. Let me read out an iTunes review for you. This comes in from Dean and Hannah, based in the UK, and titled Fantastically Helpful Podcast for Self-Builders. Thanks, guys. We've been listening to House Planning Help since episode 1, and it's pretty much taught us everything we know about self-building. We've not had time to conduct lots of research ourselves, so Ben does all the hard work for us. I love sharing this as well. We've not embarked on a build project fully yet, but we're hoping the Graven Hill site will offer an opportunity. We're massively grateful for Ben's help so far. It's shaped a lot of our thinking, especially with respect to Passive House Design Standard and eco-friendliness. If you're looking to self-build, listening to House Planning Help is a no-brainer. Love you guys. And also, they've signed up to the Hub. They're running a blog too, which I think if you're someone who feels that you're going to have the time to do that and share what you learn along the way, then isn't that what the internet's for? That's what it's there for. So share what you learn with others who might want to come on that journey. So we'll link in their website, deanandhannah.com, into the show notes. And thank you very much for the review. Remember, if you've never had a chance to do this, we'd really appreciate it if you get some value from each of these podcasts. That's the way to pay us back. Our featured interview is with Cesar Abeid, as I mentioned, project management professional, author, speaker. He's host of 2 podcasts, Project Management for the Masses, that's his main one, and the Construction Industry podcast. He's a good friend of mine, probably one of the nicest guys I know. I hate that word nice, but he's such a nice guy. He's a family man as well, and being a Facebook friend of his, I've never actually met him, but we've been friends for quite a long time, and I see him interacting with his family. I think he's great. So I brought him onto this podcast because he's helped me understand more about project management, some just in the chat that I have with him often, but specifically his book, which I didn't really know what I was getting into. We'll talk more about this in a second when we're chatting to Cesar. First up, though, I asked him about this book, why he chose to write it on this subject rather than anything else that he could have done.
Yeah, well, the reason being is that I'm naturally disorganized. I'm a mess, if left to my own devices. And project management really helped me, not only in my personal life, but also my professional life as well, to actually finish what I started. As an engineer and a creative person, I've always had many ideas for things to do, and I would start many things, but I typically would not finish them. Simple things from reading books, to more complex things, to construction projects in the house, vacation trips that I dreamed of taking but never did. So what project management did for me was to give me not only like estimates for how long something's going to take and how much it's going to cost me, but also the confidence to actually finish it.
That's interesting that you said there was a stage when you didn't use project management. And to be honest, I read your book because you're a friend of mine, we're in a mastermind group together, and I wanted to support you. But as I got into it, I just realised I, too, must be doing projects and have no idea about this framework. So can you explain it a bit and why you have your method, or perhaps explain how this method has come about?
Here's the secret. My method is not really something new. There is a body of knowledge for project management out there, and there are different methodologies, different frameworks. The one that I've learned, the one that I use is the one proposed by the Project Management Institute, PMI. Prince 2 is the most well-known in the UK, but it's the same idea. And what it does for you is it gives you not quite a step-by-step approach, but a framework for you to take something complex, for example, the building of a new home, or in my case here, the writing of a book, and it gives you a framework to take that idea, define it as best as you can, and then break it down into manageable parts, and then put them in a system that allows you to sequence the activities into schedules, and also so you can do estimates for budgets and also resources, how many people you're going to need to work on this project. And it gives you that clarity. So for a professional project manager who's been hired, for example, to manage the building or design building construction of a building or of a home, they can go through this exercise and through these steps, and then turn back to the owner, to the sponsor of the project, and say, Ben, your house is gonna look like this, based on what we decided, and you'll be able to have it on this day, and this is how much it's gonna cost you, right? And so you as the sponsor can make a decision, or can change specs, or can say, you know what, that's going to take too long. What can we do to make this a shorter build? And then the project manager is equipped to actually change things around in the planning to match your delivery date, for example, right? So, okay, actually, then we need 2 more people to work on this part. We need to make this the foundation, instead of 3 days, we need to make it in 1 day, and you can go through that with clarity and not just winging it, if that makes any sense.
Let's just take this step by step then, and start with defining what a project is.
Right. In the book, I call it the composing phase. Right? So, especially for home projects, I like to break it down into 2 parts. I like to break down the design part as a project, and then the actual build as a separate project. Especially in construction. Construction is kind of particular because you can't really, for example, halfway through the construction project, you can't just change your mind and decide, you know what, I think I want 3 stories instead of 2 when the foundations are already laid, People try. I guess you could do, but
it's not sensible. Don't do that.
Yeah, you might as well start over, right? But, project management not only applies to construction, it applies to software development, for example. And in software, this is something that could be easily done, right? To change requirements. So I recommend you take the design phase look at it as a project. And then that's when you decide what your house is going to look like, how many stories, how many windows, and all those things. And the composing phase is when you try to define that as best as you can. So sit with the other, stakeholders of this project, and it could be your wife, it could be your team, it could be your business partner, and brainstorm. Okay, what do we want this project to look like? What are the features we want this project to have? What do we want this project to do in detail? And I understand that a lot of times you don't have all that information right from the beginning, especially if you're just starting to design a home, for example. You might not know. But as best as you can, just try to come up with a set of requirements. And the recommendation here is to brainstorm freely. I like to use mind maps because they are very flexible. And just write things down. Okay, I like this project to have this feature and that feature, and like for it to do this and that, and write that down. And that's what I call the composing phase.
So coming away from that composing stage, what are you looking to have? Is it actually a list of, well, this step goes into that step? Because you can break it down into smaller chunks, can't you? Or is that more the decomposing stage?
That's a decomposing stage. Well, at the composing stage, I like to come up with the document. It's called the scope of work. You can even start thinking of a rough budget at this point. I'd like to spend no more than X amount of pounds or dollars. And these are the resources I have. And you come up with a document. You're not thinking structurally too much right now. You're not thinking about how things fit together properly. You're just trying to come up with a document that is basically the scope of work. This is what we want to do. And then comes the decomposing phase. That's when you start thinking about, okay, how does this project decompose into its more manageable parts, and how do they fit together? And we can talk about that as well.
Breaking them down, my big thing around this is that perhaps I've done that before with other projects, but when do you know that it's a small enough segment, or when do you know that actually you've gone past and you've gone down to too much detail? Right.
Well, the first thing about breaking down, and I'd like to address this every time I talk about this topic, because I used to do this wrong, and apparently what I say now, what I'm about to say, resonates with a lot of people, because I think it's part of how we as humans do things. If we've not been exposed to project management, and we try to just use our brains and do the best we can. When we try to break things down, what I used to do is, let's say I want to break this house down into manageable parts. I would start writing a task list. Okay, well, I need to do this and I need to do that. This is what I need to do. And the problem with this approach is that you're taking something that is a thing, for example, a home, or home is a noun, right? The word home. And then you're trying to break a noun into verbs, right? And that doesn't quite work. So what we do when we do that, we're, instead of breaking it down into smaller things, we're breaking it down into a sequence of verbs, a sequence of actions. So we're actually locking ourselves into a way of doing the thing instead of the thing itself. So when breaking things down, I recommend you break it down into other things. So a home would be broken down into, let's say, roof, foundation, walls, windows, insulation, the land, things that you can break it down into. And then you take each one of those and then you further break it down into other things. And there is no hard rule, but one rule of thumb that project management methods usually propose is you break it down until you get to a point that this one thing you need to deliver can be either done by you or handed off to someone, and that person can deliver that one part in, let's say, a period of time between a day and 2 weeks, or a day and a week. And that is when you've broken it down enough. If you get to that point, you say, okay, this is going to take just a couple hours to do. Maybe that's too much of a breakdown. Or if you decide that this is going to take a whole month, okay, well, you need to break this down further, right? And the advantage of that is that you can hand this work package, as we call it, to someone. And not only can they do this, but they also can give you an estimate for time and cost, right? Because it's something that is fast enough for them to actually, if they're an expert in this particular part, they'll be able to give you an estimate with no problem.
And this is all still on paper, on the computer, wherever it is. We haven't done anything, have we?
No, this is just the planning part. As we say, you plan the work and then you work the plan.
And is it Peter Taylor? Maybe you can explain this analogy that he's got. He's am I right, a British project manager. And he says that the project should be fat at the beginning, skinny in the middle, and fat at the end.
Yes, that's what he says. And what he means is, and this is from the project manager's perspective, right? Because the heavy work of the project manager is at the beginning when you plan, right? Because that's you're trying to plan the work. And then during the execution phase, which is the middle part, that's when, let's say, if the project is a home build, that's when the builders are building. And you as a project manager, if you planned it well, that's the part where you do the least amount of work,
But then surely the end would be skinny as well.
That's the thing. At the end of the project, the closing part, that's when you need to make sure that subcontractors are getting paid, permits are being fulfilled. And that's so you get involved again, right, from a higher level perspective. So that's what he means, to make sure that, the project was delivered as planned. I mean, that's not the roofer's job. It's yours, as a project manager.
What do we need to do to get this project into action?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the decision-making time, that's when you, after you decompose and you have an idea for budget and cost and things like that, just a rough idea, that's when you make a decision. Okay, well, this home is too big for me, or it's too expensive, or it's going to take too long, and then you can make decisions. But what happens a lot of times, we never get to this point. We either start our project without enough planning, or we just get overwhelmed at the beginning and we never get to this point and we never do it. So the point here is to make a decision whether or not to proceed. And let's say you can decide to stop it, and you can decide to quote unquote quit, but it's not because you're overwhelmed or because you don't know what you're doing, but because you made a conscious decision that this is not for you right now. And you can only make that decision that is informed after you do some planning, right? And after you do that and you make a decision and you change things around a little bit, that's when you start thinking about risk and then building a team and delegating, and then you start estimating in more detail. And then you can actually start thinking about doing the work.
I'm going to go through your processes. So on to the next one, defining activities. Have we talked about that a bit already, or was this a separate step?
No, that's a separate step. So you break your project down all the way down to a work package, which is that one thing. It's still a noun, right? It's still a thing that yes. You can deliver between a day and 2 weeks. And then that thing that you're going to do, that's when you define the activities that need to happen for that thing to be done and delivered. That's what I mean by defining activities. And just a step back here, if you break this down, I like to use a mind map or an organizational chart type of chart for how you break down your project. So you start with the main project in the center, and then you subdivide it into smaller parts, and then you take each one of those smaller parts and you subdivide it further until you get to that magic work package. And the cool thing about this, at the end of this process, is that if you do the work packages, all you have to do at this point is the work packages. Because if you do all of them, then the levels above them will be done, and then the levels above them will be done, and the project will be done. So when you break it down to work packages, it basically strips away the complexity of how everything fits together, and you can focus on those things that take about a day and a week to do. And that's all you have to do. You can sequence them in terms of dependencies. Okay, which one should go first? Foundations go before roofing, for example. And you can delegate, you can estimate. So it just basically takes a complex project like the building of a home and turns that project into a sequence of smaller parts. And all you have to do is focus on those parts. So what we do then is if you really want to get a very detailed schedule, for example, then you sit with, let's say, the roofer, right? Okay, so what are the activities for this work package to be complete? And that's when we talk about tasks, right? And now we have verbs. And that's what you do. That's when you define the activities. You take each one of the work packages and you come up with a list of tasks that will be necessary for them to be done.
I'm going to push you through the next bits quite quickly. Managing risk, if you've just got any comments.
Yeah, this is, when I was coming up with this math, okay, I just want to get to the bare bones, the simplest approach that I can take. And when I was doing research for the book, I actually did a podcast series called Project Management for You. And folks can find that on in iTunes, in which I interviewed some of the best project managers I know, including Peter Taylor that you mentioned, on, okay, what are the most important parts, of project management, so we can explain this to the layperson. I was surprised that a lot of people told me that risk management was the most important thing in this whole process. So I put that in the book. It wasn't my original intent, but the more I thought about it, it made sense. So risk management is when you sit down with your team or with other stakeholders and you come up with a list of risks which are potential issues that could happen in your project, right? And the rule here is to think about risks that are both impactful and also probable. You can brainstorm freely about, okay, what could go wrong here, and you write a list of, let's say, 100 different things. And then you try to narrow it down. Okay, of these things, what are the ones that are probable? And of the probable things, what are the ones that are most impactful and important? Right? And then, let's say you come up with a list of 10 to 20, or I don't know how many risks that you think are highly probable, and if they happen, it'll be a major impact on your project. And then you come up with a contingency plan for that risk. Okay, what are we going to do if that happens, right? And if you have a team, you can actually assign that risk to someone in your team so they can watch out for it and raise a flag if they see it coming.
And that takes us quite neatly on to delegating and team building.
Yeah, so if your project is complex, then you're going to have to work with people. And when you go through this exercise of composing, decomposing, it becomes clear what it is that you need to delegate. Because some of the things that, especially if you're building a home, most of those work packages will be things that you are not the best person to be doing, either because you don't know how to or because your time could be spent elsewhere. So that is what this process brings in terms of clarity. Say, okay, well, we need this types of professionals here that we don't have, right? So, and that's a great way, because that's one of the things that people tell me all the time. So how do I know what to delegate? I don't know what to delegate. I feel like I should be doing everything. I like to be in control. And project management is a way for you to still feel like you're in control because you did all the planning and you're overseeing all of this. But you can still delegate, because when you delegate that work package to a member of your team, you don't just delegate. You say, listen, here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell me how much this is going to cost me and when you'll be able to do this. Because that information is very important for you to do your estimates. So you have not only a word from your roofer, for example, that they're going to do the roof, but you also have more information. You have the cost and you also have the schedule. And with that, you can say, they tell you, okay, this is going to take me 10 days to do, and I'm going to start on September 1st. You can make a note to yourself that that's going to happen then, and you can make another note to yourself to check in with him on, let's say, September 5th. And so, and asking myself, how are you doing? Are you halfway done? So it gives you all these tools to not only know what to delegate, but to delegate better and to also control and monitor it's being done better as well.
Estimating duration and cost is next one on your process.
Yeah. So if you have your work packages and you know how much each one of them is going to cost, all you have to do is add them all up and you have the cost for your project. And duration is it's a little bit more tricky because you need to sequence your activities that you've broken down from your work packages in a sequential order. But as you can expect, some activities can be done concurrently, especially if you have more people working on the project. I describe a simplified version of building a schedule in the book, but that's the idea. You have your work packages, you have your activities, you can sequence them, you can find the dependencies, you can find activities that can be worked simultaneously, and you can even say, hey, I'd like to do more activities at the same time, so you can make a decision to bring more people into the team, so you can do that and crash your schedule so you deliver your project earlier.
It's interesting that these next few stages, there's a part of me that almost says, oh, well, yeah, we know about communications, leadership, doing the work. That's obviously a very bad thing, but do you want to comment on those three as we move through it? I don't know why I'm thinking that, just to sort of, we've done all the hard work. It's that beginning part that always seems the bit to focus on.
Yeah, and that's what I found too. It's especially for us technical. I'm an engineer. I'm all about the numbers, right? So just tell me the numbers. I'll do the math, and math doesn't lie, right? Math always works. But if you pick up a book on project management, most of the books will say that the job of the project manager is communication. 90% of what we do is communicating. So there should be a chapter in the book about communication, and it's important because, you have to be having these conversations of brainstorming sessions for not only composing, decomposing, but also communicating with your contractor, subcontractor. Okay, give me the estimates. How are you doing? So it is what the project manager does most of the time, is to communicate. So it's important to know how to do that well. I come from the construction industry. The construction industry is a very tense industry, as you may know, Ben. Most projects are, the way work is given out is based on the lowest bid mentality. So everybody who's working on a construction project, for the most part, they are there because they were the lowest price. A lot of the subcontractors, they even are in the black because they wanted to get that job, or because it's a high profile job for them, or because they need the work, they need to employ their crew, and they might not be making any profit at all. It is a tense environment, and you, as either the sponsor or the project manager, you need to be able to communicate in this environment well, because things do go wrong. And when things go wrong in a construction project, people start pointing fingers and the environment becomes tense. And there are other concerns as well in construction projects, like safety and regulations. So there's a lot of delicate topics that need to be addressed. And if you are a good communicator, then that plays to your advantage. And that's what I have found.
We've talked about a number of different steps, and we finally got round to doing the work, which we have mentioned is the lean part. So should we just go to the end of the project now?
Yeah, doing the work is the shortest chapter in the book because, it's as a project manager, you might be doing all the work, but you also might be just overseeing all the work.
In the show notes, what we'll do is we'll have this whole process, and we'll obviously have links to your book because it seems silly not to. You'll get a much clearer explanation than this. I'm sorry if I'm trying to chase you through this, but I think it's important to see those steps there and how they relate to house building. But coming back round, as I mentioned earlier, it sometimes seems strange that once you got to the end, it's the end. So reviewing, managing change, and lessons learned.
Yeah, so reviewing is a simplification of what we call the monitoring controlling in project management. And basically that is, so you have your plan, you have your Gantt chart, you have your schedule, you have your cost, your budget. And not only that, you have an idea of how the money is going to be spent throughout the project. I mean, you don't spend all the money up front or at the end, you spend it throughout the project. So what you can do as, let's say, the house is being built, you can always look back and say, okay, where are we standing right now? And in construction, a lot of times, contractors, subcontractors, they will get paid based on progress, right? So if to build this wall, it's going to cost them £10,000. At the end of the first month, they've done 50% of the wall. They'll send you a bill for $5,000, and then you pay them. So you have a lot of information regarding progress based on how people are billing them. So you can look back and say, okay, well, what was the plan here? How was I supposed to be in terms of the progress for each of these activities? And how am I doing overall in, let's say, the 0 to 100% progress in this project? And there are tools that can help you with that. I don't cover them in the book because the book is a bit of a high-level tool. But any project management tool will be able to help you do that, to find out, okay, how far along am I overall and how am I doing? And one thing that you can do too, in a Gantt chart, there's always going to be a critical path, which is the sequence of activities that are most important for your timeline. So for example, if you are falling behind schedule, project management will help you decide, okay, which activity should I throw money in right now? In other words, to speed things up. It might not be what you think, but when you do this, the project management exercise, you'll be able to find exactly, okay, what are the activities that are critical when it comes to my schedule and my budget? And then you can, as you monitor and control, as you review it, you are able to make these decisions.
Now, I'm going to ask a mean question here, but looking at your book and how that came together as a Kickstarter project, how come you weren't able to hit your schedule? What went wrong? Can you analyze that in a review?
I can totally analyze that in the review. Yeah. And I know exactly what went wrong. Yeah. When I started planning the project, what I did is, during the composing phase, I decided to work with a coach who's done it before. So in a way, he was kind of like my project manager here, even though I managed it myself, but I had his guidance because this coach has helped over, hundreds of people write books, and he knows the process and he knows all the moving parts. So we did the composing phase. He didn't know that was what I was doing or the name of it, but I basically sat down with him and said, okay, let's talk about this. Let's think about all the requirements. And then we decomposed it as well. So I was able to come up with budgets and schedules and all these things. So I was able to come up with a number for my Kickstarter campaign that I just didn't pull out of a hat. It was a number that was calculated. And that part and all those things that he helped me with, I had to hire an editor and I needed a timeline for the editor. He knew that information. He knew how much roughly that was going to cost. I needed to hire a designer for the cover, an interior layout designer as well. We're able to break those things down. And all of that was pretty much on the spot. It was right on. The part that did not go according to plan was how long it was going to take me to write it. And looking back, during my lessons learned session here, is the fact I'd never written a book before, and I grossly underestimated how long it was going to take me to write it. And the coach was able to give me an idea of how long it would take me, but there were other variables that we didn't take into account. For example, it was right around the holidays. I was not going to be in town. English is not my first language, so maybe it takes me a bit longer to write than your regular, writer that he's worked with. And the other thing too is the editing process it took longer than I expected as well. So that dragged on. And I like to think that if I write a new book, I will be able to have a better estimate for those parts. Then I'll be my estimates will be a bit more accurate.
If I got you to build a house right now, does any of that experience translate? And what would you be thinking? Would it be something that you'd want to project manage?
I probably would not project manage it myself. I think experience says a lot. If you hire a person and they're able to do it faster, they're able to do it cheaper, I find that it's worth the investment. As I said at the beginning, I'm a person who is naturally disorganized. I'm easily overwhelmed. And I find that there's great value in outsourcing that overwhelm onto somebody else who will not be as overwhelmed because they've done it before. So I think it's money well spent to hire a project manager who has knowledge of the subject matter that you're trying to do, especially if it's a project that's going to be very expensive and time consuming. And it's such importance, such as building a home. By all means, you can overlook that. You can oversee the process as a sponsor. You can co-manage with him or her.
Well, there are different levels as well, aren't there? Sometimes you will bring in a turnkey solution so that they will do the whole thing, or you bring in a contractor who will do a part of it, or you might do the self-build yourself or be using subcontractors, or you might do a mixture of it all. This is what gets so complicated for someone doing this first time, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. I want to stand back and I want to be able to enjoy it, really. So walk onto site and say, oh, what's going on here? I think you still need to be present, don't you?
Yeah, depending on what your definition of enjoying it, I think it can dictate how much you want to be a part of. As you said, there are turnkey solutions. You can just hire a project manager and have them manage the project for you. And in a way, you're not handing it off. You're just hiring help, right? Sometimes the contractor will be the project manager. Sometimes the architect manages the project. It depending on how you word your contract and how you want to build this, it could be done different ways. And again, yeah, it depends on your level of comfort and your level of desire of how much you want to be involved, for sure.
I also think it depends where you want to go. If this is almost a career that you want to get into, or you see yourself building again in the future, or you just have a passion, maybe you're very passionate about it. But I have seen the people that tackle the most themselves, that's when the project goes on the longest, and it does seem to have a tension in relationships as well.
Yeah. And that's why, even if you are going to tackle it yourself, you may want to hire a project management as a consultant. Okay, help me through this process. What do I need to do next? Not in terms of the build itself, but in terms of the planning, right? And then as it's being built, okay, what should I be looking out for here? You've built houses before. What tends to go wrong? What is the most important thing I need to be focusing on right now? So I think it's important to have the kind of input from someone who is experienced and has done it before.
Cesar, this has been absolutely brilliant. I know I have been very mean and accelerated you through your own process, even dropping a couple of steps, hoping you don't notice.
I did.
Is there anything else that's very important in just looking at these basics and thinking about a project, in this case, obviously a house?
Yeah. The one thing I like to say is we are naturally not wired for complexity, for managing complex projects like this, just using our minds, So my main point here is to have a method, have a system that's external to your brain, so you can plan the work and then work the plan, as we say it. That brings peace of mind. It removes the overwhelm. It brings clarity. All of a sudden, you know where your money is being spent. You know when you're going to have the build done, and it just makes the whole experience a lot better. So even if you don't read my book, just work with someone that can provide you this level of detail and planning, so you can sleep at night and enjoy your new home when it's done.
Cesar, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben, for the opportunity.
Check out today's show notes online at houseplanninghelp.com/109. We've got the complete process, although that will just be the headings. And I think the best way, as we've mentioned, is to go and buy my friend Cesar Abeid's book, Project Management for You. It's on Amazon Kindle for $99. And there's a special offer at the moment. He's currently giving you a free audiobook as well. And I think I might go back and listen to that. Probably if you're someone who likes podcasts, then this is the way to go as well. You could maybe read it and then listen to it too, or just listen to it. houseplanninghelp.com/109. There's an opportunity to leave a comment at the bottom of the show notes and to link to Cesar. Really enjoyed that. Thank you, Cesar. Let me leave you with a taster of what the Hub is all about. This is our premium resource. At the moment, it has to be targeted. So if you're in the UK, if you're building a new house, something from scratch, then this is for you. We've got a self-build success story. This is a new strand that we're opening up. This is actually a taster. So it's free for anyone, wherever you are in the world, to go and check out this video. I took a tour around Denby Dale Passive House when I was there last. And what I'm trying to do with the self-build success stories is have a message behind each of these mini tours, programs that we have available. At the moment, it's just scheduled up to be 3. This is the first one going in now. So it's available to anyone who is an email subscriber. You get to go there free straight away. Or if you want this right now, then you can sign up. Just go and check out the Hub, houseplanninghelp.com/hub, and it's all there. It will be obvious where you need to go. That's me done. Thank you so much for being there. I always appreciate it. You've got to the end of another podcast, hopefully wiser too. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.